Here's today's edition of Severe Thunderstorm Outlooks, the risk areas as outlined by the Storm Prediction Center and other models we use. I'm meteorologist Ted Keller. Let's get started. Today, not as bad as tomorrow for sure, but we do have some areas of interest. So, first of all, the darker green areas like this one and this one are just a marginal risk of severe storms. So, not real high on the scale, 1 out of 5 on coverage of any severe storms. And just to remind you, a severe thunderstorm is 59 mile per hour wind gusts, 1 inch hail or diameter or larger, or a tornado. And we can get more details and focused on what these risks really are here by doing this, just zooming in a little bit. First of all, here are the two level 2 or slight risk areas. There in eastern Iowa and ahead of a cold front over northern and central Indiana and up into parts of Michigan. There has been now for days a signal that a couple of these storms that formed late in the afternoon right around here could actually produce a tornado, and that has been upped now by the Storm Prediction Center to a 5% chance of any uh, intensity tornado, basically within 25 miles of any point. So the highest risk is there from Kalamazoo down through South Bend to Lafayette and over into Fort Wayne, Indiana. The 2% risk surrounds that and does include technically parts of Chicago. It does look to me, looking at the data, that the brown shading is definitely the highest potential. And not to be left out, there are coastal areas of Texas, and Louisiana, and all the way over into the panhandle of Florida, and even inland, a little bit of a 2% risk today from thunderstorms down in the deep south, basically. And that actually is reflected in NATOcast's 12Z run today. In fact, they put it up at a 3% risk there in the Florida panhandle, Mobile area, and up in the Indiana, Michigan threat area, they're up to a 5%, so that matches what the Storm Prediction Center is basically saying. On StormNet, they are showing at 4 to 5 o'clock this area here of maximum tornado potential. Not very high. It ranks in 10 to 15% range, but its placement is consistent with everything else I've been showing you. So again, kind of a spotty line of storms is expected to develop there, then eventually fill in, and that's the source of that risk of tornadoes in that area. There is a hail risk, a 15% chance of a 1 inch hailstorm or larger within 25 miles of a point that just about exactly mirrors the tornado area, the slight risk area, and also the slight risk area out in Iowa as well. The wind risk not as great in Iowa, but once the storms get started, you can see how it's shifted over to the east and southeast a little bit. 15% chance of a severe wind gust with storms that develop. Now, interestingly, on CSU's outlook for today, Tuesday, they do mention the Gulf coastal area, but not a peep out of the Indiana, Michigan threat for tornadoes. And overall, just not really showing up on threats for hail or for wind. So we'll see what happens. Speaking of seeing what happens, now tomorrow, Wednesday, here we go. This is a big day. Overnight, they upgraded this to a moderate risk, which is the level 4 out of 5, as you can see on the scale here. And then they doubled down on that at the 12:30 update today. So they have not changed their mind. It is forecast to be a pretty severe weather event. Now, these numbers basically mean coverage area. I mean, how many people will be affected, basically, not the intensity, but we'll get to that. So you can see a large portion of Missouri, almost all of Indiana, almost all of Illinois, except for the southern end of both of those. Adjacent parts of all the states are under at least a slight risk, level 2, and that level 4, moderate risk. There's only one more risk level higher than that, and it's called high, and it's the purple down here that has not shown up. But Peoria, Springfield, Illinois, Champaign, Lafayette, Indiana, those areas, all in the target zone. The tornadoes that occurred a few days ago, including Streeter, that is right in there. So they are definitely a little nervous there for sure. Now let's take a look specifically at the tornado risk. So we just took the exact same graphic, zoomed in a little bit, and now we have these hatched areas. So where you see this first hatch area, which is basically this, it's intensity 1 tornadoes. Basically, if you add up the percentages here, this first of all leans very heavily toward almost 80% chance it's going to be a weaker tornado. Okay, but about a 1 in 5 chance, if you add up those percentages, 20%, of something a little bit greater, especially on the EF2 scale side of things. Then if you look at this area right here, this is the intensity 2 area, and it is the next level up. So you just up the occurrence basically of the percentage possibility of a stronger storm. So in this case, you add up 27. This is 30% of the percentage goes to EF2 or higher, so it goes up 20% basically. So this is SPC just looking at previous data, looking at the current situation, and trying to assess tornado intensity. On NATOcast for tomorrow, we're up to a 10% chance. So not as enthusiastic, really, from central Illinois over into central Indiana and maybe a small sliver of Ohio, but a large area of 5%, which also does include a little bubble here ahead of the surface low up in Minnesota, northern Iowa, La Crosse, Rochester, and Minneapolis, St. Paul, almost down the Cedar Rapids, Waterloo, those areas. Now, I will tell you this, StormNet, which I do use in this presentation, is not as excited about tornado risk tomorrow as it was at one time. We were up in the 60% range at one point yesterday when I did this. Now, for the hour from 5 to 6 tomorrow, Wednesday, barely showing up. And then when it does advance, now this, was always going to get a little bit worse as it shifted east and a little bit east-northeast. But even now, from 7 to 8, it just goes up into the green shading here, which is, right around 30, 35% or so, and that's it. Just interesting. Of course, there's a warm front here. There's plenty of moisture. The jet stream is more than enough to produce severe, supercells, severe storms. And so this is really a touchy situation. The SPC is very right to issue the forecast they did, even if some of these learning machines are backing off a little bit because they can flicker back on later on today. That's why humans are important. Anyway, on the severe wind risk side, we've got a 30% chance of a wind gust basically rated at severe. And it pretty much coincides with the highest risk area with the wind intensity right here. Forgot the transfer scale. I did transfer it over to miles per hour, but I forgot to put it on there. Sorry about that. The hail risk is going to be confined to just a little bit of a smaller area from northeast Missouri up into west central Illinois, basically Davenport, Quincy, Peoria. 30% chance of a 1-inch hail storm or greater. On CSU's look at tornadoes for tomorrow, they have it at 15%. Right there, right over central Illinois and into parts of southeast Iowa. So a little bit shifted. And then the hail threat's right there at Keokuk. And then the wind shift, and once the winds really get going with these thunderstorms, goes from, right around Nevada and Missouri up through St. Louis, Hannibal, Quincy, Columbia's included, and also into central Illinois and Indiana. Okay, so then turning the page to Thursday, all this shifts and gets strung out basically like a lot of these weather systems do. But there is still a level 2 chance that goes all the way from the edge of Kentucky all the way up to New York City, all this area here, a level 2 for Thursday. We're looking at CSU's outlook, and so the tornado outlook is really broad brush and does actually emphasize the deep south. That's where a tropical system is forming, by the way, and moving in this direction. So if there's any wind field connected with that low pressure area at all, it's going to up the tornado chances down here. Remember so much I talk about how the low level wind fields are important. They're that important last connection that has to be made for a supercell to become tornadic. So that's what that is looking at there. And it remains to be seen whether the SPC will pull the trigger on something a little bit greater. Now, on Thursday, it's considered day 3 for them, so they wouldn't break it down by severe weather type yet. They would just make a categorical statement about it. Hail threat returns to parts of Oklahoma, as does the wind threat on Thursday as well. Then we skip Friday, not much going on that I could see. And then on Saturday, severe weather risk of 15%. So when it goes out the day 4 and beyond, the SPC just gives it a 15 or a 30% chance of any severe weather. So Nebraska, Kansas, and a small sliver of Missouri back in that. That's the forecast there. And here is CSU's look at the same thing. A little more territory covered and a little bit back farther to the west. And then finally on Sunday, we have this area here. It kind of looks like a bird. But it does get Missouri involved, Oklahoma and Kansas once again on Sunday. This is interesting. This is the next 7 days of supercell composite from NIU. Not real thrilled about tomorrow's chances. I think that's another little thing that it seems like the timing of the short waves might have something to do with the lackluster feeling that these various models have about, I don't know how to explain it exactly, but it's so dynamic and so touchy though that even one little thing that we don't even know that may set up tomorrow would make a huge difference on the good or bad side of this. And then for the next 7 days after that, week 2, the 23rd through the 29th, supercell was running high from Cheyenne, Wyoming, down to the heart of Kansas, and including all of eastern Colorado, and even getting into early July, last day of June into early July, it doesn't let up. The supercell index very high through the Central Plains and up into the Corn Belt and into part of the Great Lakes.